Hello, bonjour, bonjour, tanche, sego. My name is Susan Humphrey. I'm the Regional Director General in Ontario Region for Environment and Climate Change Canada. It is my honor to welcome Ontario Regional Chief Glen Hare, the elected Regional Chief for the Chiefs of Ontario, to the stage to provide welcoming remarks. Please join me in welcoming Ontario Regional Chief Hare. Thank you.
Well, bonjour. Good morning again, everyone. And first and foremost, to the lands we're on, I acknowledge them from the Chief of Six Nations and Mississaugas of New Credit. So we're behind time, so I'll go right into the driver's seat here and start up the car. First, my name's Guilbeault, my Anishinaabe name. I'm from Manitoulin Island, Nidum-Nising, and I'm the Ontario Regional Chief representing 133 First Nation communities here in Ontario. We as the First Nations people have a sacred responsibility to protect the land and the water, which is affirmed in our Water Declaration of 2008. This declaration acknowledges our unextinguished title and jurisdiction over lands and waters, including the Great Lakes watershed, and our responsibilities to care for and work together on ensuring the health of our fresh waters and oceans. In 2019, the Chiefs in Ontario also affirmed their support for the acknowledgement of the Great Lakes water system as a living entity with legal personhood status with all associated rights, responsibilities, voice, and agency. We honor the legacy of Grandmother Josephine Mandamin and recognize her contribution in bringing forward the petition for Great Lakes personhood during her final water walk. We have many people here at this forum who are representing First Nations communities and organizations. They are involved in Great Lakes restoration and protection as supported by the Water Quality Agreement. But also the work they will talk about here is part of our larger First Nations responsibilities to the lands and waters and our relationship to Mother Earth. To ensure they are clean waters for their future generations, we need to respect and support our inherent and treaty rights and our role as stewards of the lands and the waters to do this work. Well-supported and sustained First Nations roles in the stewardship of lands and water is essential to address the numerous threats and harms the Great Lakes Basin faces. It is critical that First Nations take the leading role in our nation-to-nation relationship that requires and this forum that represents. So I'm going to share some facts. Up north in this province, as I was sharing with someone yesterday, you may and may not know there's a lot of creeks literally dry. Rivers that are dry. Literally, they're dry, there's no water. And our lakes are getting smaller. Ontario has or had the most water. As I fly over the province over the years, we had lots of water in this province, and it's dwindling away. For First Nations families, it means more than just what the water. The water is so sacred to us. There's a history of this shirt that we wear, but I want to share with you why I wear it today in front of us. With no water, our families in the far north can't wash. It's contaminated. They can't do laundry. A lot of times you can't eat because you need water, but there's no good water to cook. No bathing. You add all that up. Now, everyone in here and us as First Nations, it's a law to send your kids to school. So if you send your kids to school with all these things I just outlined, you know what happens to us? And it's not their fault because water. The school picks up the phone and calls Children's Aid Society. These kids, I don't think they're being looked after. They're dirty, they're hungry, they're not, no clean clothes. Can you come and get them or get help for them? Then they come, apprehend the kids with the police. That is the reality of no water in our communities, let alone the province itself. I ask everyone in here to take that, even right now, take yourselves, think about it. Your own children, if I come and get them, you ruin a family forever. So they call, and more than or beyond protecting what we are here to do today, we need you. We need each other. I've been pounding the pavement about nuclear waste being buried along the shorelines. So I'm not going to doodle over what if and all that. The real thing about nuclear waste is money. And across the ocean, in some parts of the country, they're not even allowed to bury the nuclear waste over there. So why bring it here? And if you do beat us politically and you get the right to bury your nuclear waste, I would recommend you go about 100 miles inland, where we can look after it, make sure it don't leak. And it's no joke, but when things go disastrous, they say blame the Indians. That's what I hear. That's what we hear every day. We're getting tired of it. So we're taking action, and we want to do action with everyone in here. Mining companies, the construction, the forestry. You leave a big hole in our communities. You leave bad water behind. You take all the riches to where you come from. So to the government, the decision makers, Prime Minister and the Premier, bring them to the table. Let's share these resources, and that's all our leadership's been asking for, is to share the resources and the decision making. Right now they're enjoying water, they're splashing in it. We can't. This country's taking a lot of things for granted. And it's high time here in 2022 that, hey, let's sit down and do something. I don't think it's too late yet, but some creeks and rivers, it is too late. So again, that's what I ask of us here today. And as I said yesterday, if I can't bring my comments and my concerns here, where do I take them, especially when it concerns water? Let me know where I need to go then. So that's why I wear this. We love our children too. We want them to be nice and bright and clean and go to work, go to school and show themselves off that they can be smart. We can't do that. So protect our waters. Miigwech.
Thank you, Ontario Regional Chief Hare. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you the Honourable Steven Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Welcome, Minister, to the stage to provide some words of welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you very much, Regional Chief, for these powerful words. Before I start, I too would like to say that we are on the traditional territory issued from the Treaty of 381, the Haudenosaunee, the Mississauga First Credit, and the Adirondack. We do those land acknowledgement as a step towards reconciliation with the Indigenous people in this country, and to mark the respect and the gratitude that we owe them for the use of their territory. I'm very happy to welcome you all to the second day of the 2022 Great Lakes Public Forum. It's great to see so many people from near and far come together for one of the most important resources that we have, the Great Lakes. They are one of the world's largest surface freshwater ecosystem, holding almost 20% of the world's surface freshwater and providing this water for about 40 million people, as well as vital habitat for wildlife. The Great Lakes have also been a cultural and trading vector for millennia, since long before Europeans came to these shores. This forum represents a tremendous opportunity to engage on sustainable actions to protect and restore this shared resource. It's also a wonderful opportunity to celebrate 50 years of collaboration between Canada, the United States, under the Canada-United States Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. My department, Environment and Climate Change Canada, was only a year old, and the EPA was only 2 when our 2 countries recognized the horrendous decline in water quality in the Great Lakes. We have come a long way since that shared commitment we made to work closely together to restore and protect this incredible resource through a new framework for binational cooperation. We've seen excellent collaboration between the 2 countries over the past 50 years to protect, restore, and enhance these shared jewels that straddle the border between our 2 countries. We've engaged state and provincial governments, municipalities, local authorities, First Nations, Métis, and tribal governments, industry, non-governmental organization, and the public in working together to achieve a healthy and sustainable Great Lakes ecosystem. Together, we've forged friendships and partnerships while addressing complex files. Canada and the United States have worked together to take action to reduce phosphorus inputs to Lake Erie to address algae blooms. We're continuing to address legacy issues in local areas of concern. In Canada, for example, we've made significant progress on implementing the multi-partnered Randall Reef Contaminated Sediment Management Project in the Hamilton area of concern. Earlier this year, I was in Hamilton to celebrate the completion of stage 2 of this project, and I'm looking forward to getting the 3rd and final stage underway in the coming months. We've also made considerable progress on numerous multi-partnered remedial actions in the Toronto area of concern. Tomorrow, I'll be taking a boat ride around the area to see some of the successes, but also to discuss the work that needs to continue. Hier, vous en avez appris un peu plus sur l'état des Grands Lacs, sur les mesures qui sont prises pour les restaurer et les protéger, ainsi que respecter les engagements pris dans le cadre de l'accord sur la qualité de l'eau dans les Grands Lacs entre le Canada et les États-Unis. Nous sommes toutes et tous bien conscients de l'ampleur du travail qu'il reste à faire pour protéger cette inestimable ressource. And the Government of Canada is committed to doing its part to ensure that we continue working in partnership with each and every one of you. We're investing millions of dollars through different programs across the country, including in this region, specifically for the Great Lakes, contributing to the restoration and protection of freshwater in Canada. Budget 2022 earmarked $20 million to support the action plan on freshwater for this current year. The funding includes money for different cleanup programs across the Great Lakes. Just last week, we announced $4 million over 3 years for 39 projects that are being piloted by local organizations. A key priority under the Great Lakes Protection Initiative, as well as other Government of Canada freshwater program, is working with Indigenous communities and organizations. As a government, we also remain committing to establishing a Canada Water Agency by the end of this year to keep our freshwater safe, clean, and well managed. The challenges we've faced in protecting and restoring our freshwater over the past several decades will be further tested by the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. We must put in place and maintain investments, partnerships, and governance structures that will meet the challenges of the future and safeguard this precious resource. When reviewing the program for this forum, I was very happy to note this afternoon's session to honor and focus on initiatives and examples of First Nation, Métis, and tribal protection and restoration in the Great Lakes. Their history is woven together. This Friday will mark the second annual Day for Truth and Reconciliation. another vital component of our reconciliation process. I encourage you all to join us in honoring this day. For our US colleagues, you'll see many of us wearing a pin or hearings or the orange shirt as the regional chief was wearing. It is a sign of respect, but also commemoration for the tragedies of residential schools in Canada. In fact, before being Environment Minister, I was Heritage Minister for 2 years. And the first bill that I was able to get adopted in Parliament was the creation of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which we will commemorate this Friday for the second year. Tomorrow, there will also be a session that will celebrate community initiatives and citizen engagement. The Great Lakes region is heavily populated, and engaged citizens are a vital component to our progress in restoring and protecting water quality and ecosystem health. Ces 5 décennies d'action nous donnent évidemment de bonnes raisons de célébrer. Pour la suite des choses, il faudra miser sur cette histoire et nos apprentissages pour veiller à ce que la région des Grands Lacs soit plus résiliente, que les activités y soient menées soient plus durables et au bénéfice de toutes les communautés, afin que nous puissions toutes et tous prospérer ensemble aujourd'hui et pour de nombreuses années à venir. I want to thank you all for your collaboration, your presence in this forum, to celebrate, but also to look at the challenges that are ahead of us. Again, I would like to wish a happy 50th anniversary to the Canada-US Great Lakes Water Agreement, and wish us another 50 years of productive and fruitful collaboration and work together. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister. So good morning and welcome back to day 2 of the Great Lakes Public Forum. Et bonjour, bienvenue à la 2e journée de le Forum Public des Grands Lacs. Thank you to everyone for joining us in person and virtually. We've got a busy day, so over to you, Chris, for a quick welcome, and then let's get right into the sessions.
Thank you, Sue. They took away my podium. I'm lost this morning. Welcome back, everybody. So delighted to see you. It was a great day yesterday. I think look at the agenda. Looking at the agenda, it's going to be just as good today, including the panel that we're about to begin, where you'll hear from my boss, Regional Administrator Debra Shore, as well as the Minister and Ontario Regional Chief Hare. So I think it's going to be a great one. Welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Hey, hello again. And our next session is an armchair discussion and conversation among the Honorable Steven Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Debra Shore, the Regional Administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 5, and the Ontario Regional Chief, Glen Hare, elected Chief of the Chiefs of Ontario. Please join me on the stage. This is going to be an interesting dialogue, and I don't want to take up any time after they get mic'd up, so we'll welcome them and then get going.
Where do we sit? I'll sit here so I can get away quicker. Yeah, well, I've been told I'm under the spotlight sometimes, but this is it. Oh.
Just give me a minute. So thank you very much, Regional Chief Glen Hare, Debra Shore, Regional Administrator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Region 5. I'm looking forward to our conversation, including but not restricted to areas of concern, algae blooms and the effects of climate change on the Great Lakes. As I said, I think we have a lot to celebrate 50 years into the agreement, but as the chief rightly pointed out, there are challenges to Indigenous communities. There are challenges to all of us that are ahead of us. So maybe we can start, and we will get to the challenges, I promise. But if we reflect on past successes to restore water quality and ecosystem health in some of the most degraded locations around the Great Lakes, known as areas of concern, significant progress has been made. But maybe I could turn to you, Ms. Shore. Debra, and you can call me Steven. Can you take a few moments to tell us what comes to mind when you reflect on the successes regarding the areas of concern?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you, Chief Hare. It's an honor and a privilege. I was appointed almost a year ago, similar to Minister Guilbeault, Steven. And the areas of concern, of course, are the legacy contaminated sites around the Great Lakes. And there's been work to try to clean them up for decades. And what we've seen is that in places where the work can be completed, in Sheboygan, in Buffalo, and other places, there's enormous redevelopment and revitalization. And a place that was contaminated now becomes celebrated and open for economic development and hiking and biking and fishing. And so the economic studies have shown that for millions of dollars invested produces many millions more in tax revenue and redevelopment. So it's just an exciting story of revitalization. And now most of you have probably heard that with the $1 billion in addition to the core funding for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that comes through the bipartisan infrastructure law that President Biden and the US Congress passed, we are going to accelerate that cleanup work on the areas of concern and make dramatic increases in the cleanups so that we hope that almost all of them will be able to be delisted by the end of this decade.
Thank you very much. Regional Chief Hare, I think it
Yes.
Regional Chief, your and call me Steven, please. Glenn, can you, so you talked rightly so about some of the many challenges. Are there examples that come to your mind in terms of some of the successes that we've seen in the past 50 years?
I wish I had lots, but first, toxic algae, it continues to harm the fish and that we depend on. And that's our life source up north. And a lot of it, as you know, there's some fish don't exist either anymore yet. But it pollutes our drinking water and causes health problems. Yeah, I was up north not too long, a few short years ago. We have our families that live off the land literally, and we got 10 and 12-year-olds fishing and netting for lake sturgeon. And those of you that know fish, lake sturgeon is a humongous fish, and we have these young kids trying to make a livelihood out of it, and they go get it. But now it's going to be extinct if we don't do anything. I feel so alone when I talk about the issues I'm sharing here, because these are on the ground things. These are the things that I don't hear when I come to these places or other events. So that's why I raised him here. And so also our big lakes, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and Huron, all these algae blooms are starting to pop up all over the place. And I'm from Manitoulin Island, Lake Huron, the big body of water there. And in front of us there, the waters, that's a highway, literally a highway for these big boats that travel North America, I guess. But then they just come into our bays and do their stuff and dump their stuff and keep going. I heard again a while back, it didn't come to anything, which is we need to police them more. but I don't see any policing in that regard of these big major boats, fancy boats, rich boats, come and ruin us or our territories. So we need to go very much more on the policing aspect of who's doing that to our waters. They're visitors, so they must respect where we come from, all of us here. So again, yesterday, Abraham Francis from the Mohawk of Akwesasne yesterday discussed the work of the St. Lawrence affecting their territory. And also Akwesasne wanted the AOC designation to help address the major impacts to the river as a result of extensive industrial pollution. Much work and many improvement has occurred since the designation of 1987, but there is still much more to do. First Nations leadership has been pivotal for getting action on these areas of concern to help clean up messes we did make. And again, you know, the forestry plays a big role in what we're talking about here. I mentioned forestry because it's a shock, but it's also somewhat of a shame that we have to buy, you know, the 2x4 lumber, steel studs now, because there's no more forestry. Did any of us get rich off the forestry? No. We used to enjoy and build anything on the fly. We can't do that anymore. We got to go buy it now. We got to buy the steel products. You see trucks going down the highway right now to the mills. They're only about 5, 6 inches, 17 inches round, where they used to be like this. We don't enjoy that anymore up the north. Those are the realities up north versus in the city limits here. So them resources are shared here, but not with us. Those are facts. So climate change also is an overriding challenge affecting everything, including the survival of all of us. Creator has taught us that you know, if we don't take care of Mother Earth, climate change will. It will wake us up. But we're almost too late. We're sleeping in. There's disasters happening. Look at the East Coast right now. Look at the fires that we're having. Those could be prevented because of, but us mankind here, that we're the ones that are doing it. You weren't here yesterday, Minister, but I followed the car down here and I was thinking of everything. I don't know how many cigarettes I see come flying out of the cars. Those are forest fires. And then we blame climate change though. That's people problem. I was talking to a young gentleman just today. He's not from here, but he says when he came here, where I come from, that much water is a lifesaver. He says, when I got here to Canada, to Ontario, he says, you guys splashing it. So that's a big difference. So again, it's money at the end of the day, but we want to make it a life changer and a life savior. My community, we have a big cement plant that we lease to a cement outfit. Make cement right in the middle of our community. I pay my water bill just like everyone else in the community. It's not very much, but it's enough. We shouldn't even be paying for it, but we do. I think it's about 120 a month. I think when I was there anyway, about 20 years ago, that they were just paying about 200 a month. Can you imagine how much water they use and waste though when they fill up a truck every minute? That really hurts me. Here we watch what we use, and then they just, if you come along and tease them, they'll just spray you. You had all that waste up. Still today, they're in there. So we got a long ways to go, Minister, and we have good people here. Like I said, I think we're here to help. We just need to invite whoever more leadership. I'm the only one here. There's a couple of chiefs here. When I addressed because the mayors and the reeves are supposed to be getting more power to them, I addressed them in Ottawa, and they said, let's work together. I had one chief in the audience of 1,500. I got a long ways to go to get in there. So I share that.
The only minister in a crowd of 500 chiefs and regional chiefs at the Assembly of First Nations climate change meeting in Fredericton. So I think you're right. You know, we need to we have a long way to go. Canada, when the agreement was signed, we had 17 areas of concerns. 3 have been remediated. I was talking about Hamilton earlier. 2 are almost there. So out of 17, we're in the process of having resolved, remediated 5 of them, but there's still 12 areas of concern to go. So some progress has been made, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
That's where I was supposed to be today, in Fredericton, I think, the climate. But I was saying this is more important. So I sent one of my grand chiefs to go represent us over there. But yeah, we need to be here, not just talk about it and saying that, be here in person like this.
Well, you were talking earlier about algae blooms, so maybe we can talk about that. I mean, obviously, we know the impact of algae blooms. I don't have to go into them, but just to give you an idea of we know what the impacts are to communities, to people, to the environment. Economically, the cost to Canadians is around $400 million per year. That's a lot of money. And it's not a new problem. When the agreement was signed in 1972, part of why the agreement was signed was because of algae blooms. So it's something we've been dealing with for some time. It's certainly very urgent in Lake Erie. The Canada Erie Lake Erie Action Plan frames how the government of Canada and the province of Ontario have been collaborating. But maybe, Debra, could you talk a little bit? And in fact, that's the first thing you told me when we met earlier after being introduced, algae blooms. That's certainly for the US government and the EPA a big area of concern.
It is, Steve. And I brought a prop because I found the props help. This is a vial of phosphorus crystals. Happy to pass it around, have you take a look. And the crystals were gathered through a new process that was invented by researchers at the University of British Columbia some years ago to install at wastewater treatment plants, where there's a lot of phosphorus coming in both from fertilizer and from the food we eat and our own human waste, and discharged from wastewater plants into waterways. Of course, the phosphorus is a problem. It's essential for plants to grow. And so we absolutely need it for agriculture on land. But in water, it causes algae to grow, which sucks up oxygen, leaving none for aquatic life. Through this process, by capturing the phosphorus at wastewater plants, turning it into these crystals, which are not water soluble. They're sold to commercial fertilizer blenders who mix them with some magnesium and nitrates and provide them to farmers. The research being done, supported by Environment Canada, is showing increased yields for a number of crops and less runoff, because this is injected into the soil. Plants produce an acid as they develop roots or fruit that takes up the phosphorus when needed, so less needs to be applied. It lasts longer in the soil, and it's a wonderful thing. Now, what I have seen is that regulation drives innovation. The problem of nutrient loading does not have a single source, and it won't have a single solution. But we need to use every tool we have and invent some new ones to capture that phosphorus and turn what is currently a vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle. What excites me is the opportunity for collaboration between Canada and the United States in doing this research in the Western Lake Erie Basin to convince farmers that not only is this a way to reduce the nutrient loading, but to increase yields. And that's beginning to happen through some research that is already funded. And I just think it's so exciting. But we're going to need to use every tool and invent some new ones, because it's a growing problem, even though we've been reducing some of the loading.
Thank you. Regional Chief, you spoke a little bit about this, or Glenn, sorry. You spoke about this earlier. Do you want to offer a few more thoughts on it?
I guess the facts are what we'd like to, Please don't leave us on the sidelines anymore. You know, I think we definitely need all the minds to come together to deal with climate change and everything. We need to do that together. We know, we always say we are the better protectors. So if we are, call us and we'll share what we know. And we can't do it by ourselves.
You spoke a couple of times about climate change. I spoke about it also in my remarks. We know it's going to create further pressure on the Great Lakes, and you talk about the fact that we need climate action. You may not know that about me, but for all of my adult life, I was a climate change activist. I think the Prime Minister would argue I'm still a climate change activist, but working within government as opposed to outside government. Suzanne was asking me last night when I arrived if I'd really climbed the CN Tower when I was at Greenpeace. I did really climb the CN Tower when I was at Greenpeace. I went back this weekend for the first time with my son. I took the elevators, so much easier. I wasn't sure they were going to let me in, but it was all fine. But all jokes aside, I mean, we know that that climate is going to create severe pressures. We're already seeing it. You were talking about water levels going down, droughts, forest fires, hurricanes. There's Ian that's going to hit Tampa, I think, today. What, Debra, maybe I can start with you. What's your perspective on climate change and how we can work together to try and manage some of the impacts that climate change are having and will be having on the Great Lakes?
So Canada and the United States, particularly in the Great Lakes region, are positioned, I think, to see climate migration to the Great Lakes cities because of the access to water. I would recommend a book to you all called The Big Thirst by a man fittingly named Charles Fishman.
Recording in progress.
The subtitle is The Secret Life and Turbulent Future of Water. And one of the points he makes in this book is that in the last century, we moved water to people. In this century, people will move to water. And I think we'll see it on the part of industry before individuals, but I believe we will see it. In fact, we already are. In Chicago, where I live, a brewer called Lagunitas built their second largest brewery in Chicago. They're a California company. Why? Because of access to water and to their market. Water is heavier than oil. It's costly to move. So I think we need to plan and prepare, and along with that, it's incumbent on those of us who have access to Great Lakes water to demonstrate wise stewardship. As a friend of mine put it, to learn to live like misers in a land of apparent plenty. Because we're going to need to show the rest of the nation and the world that we can be caring stewards and careful with this precious resource for which there's no substitute. I also like to say, unlike fossil fuels, there's no substitute for fresh water, the substance on which virtually all life depends. So we're in a fortunate place, but also it's a place of enormous moral and other obligation.
So we got, you know, when we're done here today, we have some serious things coming our way when we talk about all of this, and that's Line 5. Everyone knows Line 5. I think they know our position on it. And again, we can move the yardstick on that if we're at the table together. And the transportation of toxic waste is also on the highway. This is where communication has to work if it's on the highways to our communities. So these are disastrous things that are coming, and they all equal climate change and whatever we're talking about here, all the waters, that all equals that. And that's what I mean. Where do I take them?
You're right. I mean, Canada hasn't always been a model when it comes to fighting climate change, and our government is trying really hard to change that. So earlier this year, I presented the first ever plan that shows how Canada will meet its 2030 targets. It's called the Emission Reduction Plan. It's per sector modeled measures, what are the financial, regulatory, or investment measures that are needed in the oil and gas sector, in transportation, in agriculture. But we are playing catch up. Our emissions have gone down in 2019. They've gone down in 2020. We know that it's partly because of the pandemic, obviously, but 2019, the economy was full force, and our emissions still went down, largely because we've adopted some pretty aggressive targets to reduce methane from the oil and gas sector. But we need to reduce our dependencies on fossil fuels. There's no way we find solutions to climate change. I mean, if we could produce all the renewables that we want, if we continue depending on fossil fuels the way we do, we won't get there. Which is why, like California is doing, and the Biden administration, we're aiming to have more and more zero emission vehicles on our road. 100% of light duty vehicles in Canada that will be sold in 2035 will have to be zero emission vehicle. So you won't be able to sell an internal combustion engine anymore. And that's not very far from now. I mean, 2035, when you're thinking of the investments that are needed to shift this industry around, and the fact we need to deploy charging stations. So we've deployed in Canada about 25,000 charging stations in the last 2 years. Our goal is to deploy 50,000 in the next 3 years, and 200,000 extra by 2030. So that wherever you are, pretty much in Canada, it's going to be very easy. And in fact, in some provinces, it's if you look at what Quebec and BC are doing. So in Quebec, you can go from the Gaspé Peninsula all the way to Abitibi-Témiscamingue, and you'll have charging stations. So that's, I don't know how many kilometers, but it's a lot. Quebec's a pretty big province. So you basically go to the most eastern part of the province to north western part of it, and you can do it using an EV. But EV is not the solution. I don't want to give the impression that it's about. You spoke about what we need to do in the agricultural sector and better managing phosphorus and nutrients that we're using. It's about better buildings. So it's about a lot of things. Sometimes I feel like I speak like an EV sales rep. I'm not. I don't even have a vehicle. I've never owned a car. I will likely never own a car. But for those people who need cars, it's better that they're in EVs than in internal combustion engine. That being said, we're investing in Canada 10 times more in public transit than we are in EVs, because EVs are great, but transit is even better. But it's not available for everyone. So there are people who need cars, and I get that. As someone who doesn't have a car, I understand that some people do need cars. Maybe we have a few minutes, closing remarks, perhaps for both of you in a minute and a half. What do you see the next 50 years? What will the next 50 years look like?
I don't know, but I think that we are facing enormous challenges and enormous opportunities to demonstrate as human beings that we can rise to the challenge that climate change poses. Professor David Orr from Oberlin refers to climate change as the long emergency. And he says, we are biological creatures. We've evolved to respond to the imminent threat, the robber on our doorstep. Our responses kick in. But the long emergency, the slow growing emergency, which climate change has been for decades, I don't know if we've evolved biologically to respond in a way commensurate with the threat. So that's our challenge, and how to develop the emotional intelligence and the governance structures, particularly that will allow us to respond in a way that's appropriate and necessary. I don't know, but I can't think of any challenge more worthy of my time, of our time and effort than that.
Thank you. Glenn?
That's a big question, 50 years. One, for sure, I won't be here. What always bothers me when we meet government officials, decision makers, is deadlines. There should not be a deadline on this one. I'd be more comfortable if we use the word review in 2030 and the next 10 years, because deadlines to me means it's a rush date. Then we'll do a sloppy job, is what I think. We can't do that in this one. We just can't be, even beyond 50 years, there'll likely still be a lot of problems yet. Because 50 years ago, this was just starting, and look where I am sitting now. So the new Canada-Ontario agreement points towards greater recognition and support for First Nations, but we need to go further. It should be a First Nations Canada-Ontario agreement with First Nations involved, with the capacity to make decisions and take actions as full partners. Congrats. That's it.
Thank you, Glenn. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Please join me in thanking Debra and Glenn for this panel. I wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.